So yeah, man. So somebody who I've been mentoring and coaching, they asked me, how do you tune out negativity in your life without becoming too isolated or alienated? The number one thing when it comes to the noise is this: you have to control your inputs. You have to control what it is that you allow inside your mind. And then, of course, the idea of things that I can control, things that I can't control, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? There's some things that we just can't control, and it's gonna be negative. There's some things that we can't control that are just, that we can't worry about. And then there are other things that we can control. And so there's some of our inputs, majority of our inputs we can control. What do I mean by that?
Yep.
We control our inputs by who we surround ourselves by. We control our inputs by what we read, what we listen to, what we watch, right? Who we spend time with. Those are inputs. Now, for this particular person, I realize they're in pilot training, right? That's equivalent to like being in college, or even equivalent to being in the workplace, because pilot training in the Air Force, that is your job, right? And so you're constantly in this space where you're being bombarded with information. And again, things that I can control, things that I can't control. And in that space, you have to know how to control what influences you allow to have, the control that you allow those things to have on you, right? And what influence you allow it to be. And so with that, what I would say is, number one, realize that there are gonna be people who don't think like you, who don't act like you, who don't have your same mindset, that are gonna be in your workplace, that are gonna be around you, and that's okay. And you don't have to necessarily isolate yourself from them. You don't have to necessarily be negative towards them, but you can control the narrative of the conversations that you have with those folks. Right. What do I mean by that? They might bring up politics. Hey, look, man, I appreciate that, but I would prefer that we don't have a conversation about politics.
Right.
Hey, man, and maybe you don't even say it that way. Maybe you just steer the conversation to, hey, what are you into eating, right? Like, we could talk about our family, we could talk about food, we could talk about fun, we can talk about other things in life other than politics. Now, they often talk about, they say, don't talk about politics and religion in the workplace.
Right.
Me personally, I've got no problem talking about that. But I've learned and matured over time to be able to talk about that. And the biggest thing that for me is this: when it comes to who you surround yourself with, when it comes to your influences, when it comes to your inputs, the biggest thing for me is insulation versus isolation. Right? Now, that's a double-edged sword, because if we are talking about a community environment, if we're talking about our siblings, if we're talking about our family, then I want to make sure that no matter what someone is going through in our environment, that we insulate them and not isolate them.
Yeah.
However, at times when you're in the workplace or in other environments where you feel as though you are actually being isolated because you're the odd person out, because you're the different one, then you have to figure out how to manage that. And so when I look at that, you got to learn how to play the game. What do I mean by playing the game? What I mean by that is this: you don't want to become isolated, but you also know that you don't necessarily vibe with those people. You don't necessarily get down with those people like that. And so if you don't get down with those people like that, then you have to understand how to continue to play the game, to let them know that you're engaged, that you want to learn, that you're engaged, that you want to be on the team, so to speak, in that environment.
Yeah.
But you have to make certain that you don't allow all those things that they're saying, all the negative things that they're saying, or the ideologies that they subscribe to, that they don't begin to permeate your mind.
So I like that, because one of the things that comes to mind is you have to be an effective communicator. So when you're in that kind of environment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to seek out, okay, they have some philosophies and some ideologies that I don't agree with and I don't subscribe to, but I'm going to work on the small talk and figure out what are they interested in.
Yes.
So if we don't agree on politics, but I know you're a fan of football, you may not even be a fan of the same team as mine, but we can talk about the Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
We can talk about those other small things that we do have in common.
And that is part of that playing the game, right? And this is why one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give to people when they go into a new environment, one, is be the most interested person instead of the most interesting person. Okay, what do I mean by that? What I mean by being the most interested person is get interested in them. Hey, Dana, what are you into? Hey, are you into sports? What sports do you like? hey, what do you like to eat? Like, where are you from? Do you have a significant other? Do you have children, right? Like, do you have siblings? Get interested in them, and so now you can understand who they are, and you could also begin to understand how they think and why they think the way that they think.
Yeah.
But you also have the ability that you steer clear of some of those negative things.
Because there's a list of general things that we can talk about with any other human being.
Right, and this is and this is the essence of what we're talking about here is how do you control the inputs? How do you control the noise? How do you manage the noise without alienating and isolating yourself and without becoming negatively influenced?
Yeah.
And so that is the difference, right? So I control the narrative in terms of what I allow to come in and permeate my mind. But part of that is still staying plugged into people with the small talk, with being interested in them.
Yeah.
But we don't have to have this conversation about the things that we definitely don't see eye to eye on. So that way you ensure that you don't isolate yourself. Because what some people do is they immediately go into, I'm just not fooling with you at all, right? As Big Sean say, I don't fool with you. And now they just completely go off the range. They just completely go off and they don't deal with them at all. And so what ends up happening when you do that, when you take that approach, people go, oh, well, he doesn't care. They say, oh, he doesn't want to be here. Oh, he's not interested. He's not a good dude. Literally, I've had it happen to me.
He's not a team player.
He's not a team player, right? And here's how I learned about this. So I was deployed, and what I would do is the guys, they wanted to watch the same show over and over and over, Friday Night Lights, right? So over and over and over, they wanted to watch Friday Night Lights. We're deployed. I'm thinking, guys, y'all have watched this show over and over the last 2 deployments. And so or like y'all literally in this one deployment, y'all on the second run of this TV show. There's nothing new, nothing funny about it for me. Like the jokes are the same.
Yeah.
And so I would actually leave every night and I would go to the other side of the base and I would go play ping pong. And I would literally get my workout in and I would play ping pong. My attraction was to the older guys for that knowledge and the wisdom. So I'm over there playing ping pong with the old homie. I'm getting my sweat on. I'm getting knowledge from the old homie. And I would come back and be like, all right, cool. And then I found out that they were like, well, Jason, you weren't a team player. They were like, Jason, you weren't interested in us. Jason, you didn't hang out with us. You didn't get to know us. And I had to own that and I had to realize, like, you're right, I didn't.
Yeah.
Because I was actually isolating myself. So I had to take the heat for isolating myself. You see, sometimes people, they make these decisions and they want to become the victim and they want to blame other people. In that moment, I could have blamed them and be like, no. I had to accept my responsibility that I isolated myself. And when I accepted that, I said, okay, cool, what am I going to do differently? So then I start figuring out, how do I get to know them? And then how do I invite them into my space, or how do I play a little bit more, right? Or maybe it's a half and half. Maybe I spend half the time with them and then the other half playing ping pong or doing my thing, right?
Because there's still in that moment, it's still a teachable moment to them. Hey, I'm going over here and I'm playing ping pong, but I'm a guy who's into learning from older cats and more experienced cats in whatever arena I'm in or wherever I'm trying to go. So I can kick it with y'all for a little bit, but I want to go over here and get some wisdom from OG.
Right. And again, this is why it's important that we connect with people. This is why it's important that we have those donut moments. So what I started doing is I started actually spending more time smoking cigars with the guys, because that was our donut moments during deployments, right? And so I would actually sit and have coffee with them. I would actually spend the time to get to know who they were.
Yeah.
I would find out what they were interested in. I would find out what made them interesting. I would find out about their lives.
Right.
And so now when we started flying together, it wasn't this person who was disinterested. It wasn't the dude who didn't care.
Yeah.
But it was a huge learning lesson for me.
Yeah.
And so you can still be in an environment and you can not isolate yourself, but also control for the negativity, control for the chaos and the nonsense. And so really to drive home this point, when you think about it, you have to be mindful of your frame of mind. You have to protect your mental consciousness. You have to protect your state of mind, frame of mind. Only you can do that. You protect that and you nourish it by what you read, what you watch, what you listen to, who you spend the most time around. And just because you might have spent the work day around those people doesn't mean that in the evening you can't renew your mind by reading, by writing, by listening, and by having conversations with people that are going to elevate you mentally to another level in a better way.
Yeah.
So that you then offset that daily intake of stuff. But then also in that daily intake of what's happening in the workplace, understand how to begin to just kind of move some of that stuff out. And then push through the noise to then get to that point of being interested in them so that you stay connected, so that you don't intentionally or unintentionally isolate yourself from the group.
It lets me know when you say that last point, because I want to speak to the person that says, well, what if I'm in an environment and there aren't people that I really feel like I can talk to outside? Let's say a deployment, right? But what it makes me think about is that even if you're in an environment where you don't feel like you have a lot of people to talk to, or maybe you consider yourself a more introverted person, then if you're not having those conversations outside of the workplace, then the reading, the listening to the podcast and things like that still fills that space of positive inputs.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Again, it's controlling the inputs. The renewing of your mind. While you might not have a person directly to talk to because you haven't found that person or that group of 5 people yet, right? I can name my 5. I know who my 5 are, that when I need that nourishment of my soul, my mind, I have my 5 that I can call, right? The value of who you are and the value of where you will be at and who you will become is determined by the people you spend the 5 people you spend the most time around. So I can name my 5, but if you don't have your 5 yet, that's okay. To your point, what are the podcasts that you're listening to? What are the books that you're reading? What are the books that you're listening to? What are you listening to and watching on YouTube, right? Just that alone, just those things alone will change your mind, will change your mindset, and will change your trajectory, and will also enhance your ability to deal with the negativity inside of your environment. But you have to be intentional about that. And if you're not intentional about what I'm reading, what I'm listening to, what I'm watching, if you're not intentional about that, which is being intentional about your inputs, then the outputs is going to be, who knows, undetermined, because you haven't controlled for the inputs.